Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct the defendant that he cannot disrupt these proceedings with such outbursts.
Give us free.
If we are to have any semblance of order in this country,
Give us
peace, unity, and welcome my conscious and unconscious family and friends. This is the all-new Black Village Community Podcast, and I am truly your host of the show, JC, aka Afro Black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut, without any fear, as I use my mic as a spear to chucker you with liberated truth. I am your host and your native soldier in the struggle. My purpose and mission for this show is first to enlighten, inform, and engage. And I want to engage with all who claim to know the truth. All truth seekers and my native family, I welcome you. This show is dedicated to all our indigenous native ancestors and to all those who've carried the mantle of truth, and to every person with the ability to throw off the chains of comfortable habit and unwarranted assumption and move in a new, liberated direction that is guided by truth and observational evidence, no matter where that direction may lead you. My main objective and purpose here is freedom, mind, soul, and spirit. That being said, welcome to the Black Village Community Podcast, and much love from our great universal goddess and mother of all, living here and above.
AC in the house.
We are the Halusa Nation. Our DNA is of earth and sky.
Bismillah. Hey, true and living by the G code. What the is fleek though? Don't ask them, what do we know? What I forgot is better than whatever they remember. Never mind, I'm off it, it's quiet form. Time to put the temper tantrums to the quiet corner. Hush, that's enough, said the ruler. No suckers allowed to break bread or asunder. The daylight, lightning and the thunder. The sun, moon, the stars and the hunger. Abundance in bundles, blessings and troubles. Towers and tunnels, views and valleys, waves and peaks. Streaks you from sun, planet Earth. And ain't scared of no Mars attack. What type of bars is that? Stay off my jack. I'm out they corny riot garments. Top 5 diet on and on them. Superfly, slicker, top pro. Equal diving on them. You why you lying, homie? You won't play with my emotions, Smokey. Big chief, heart rate, big beat, B-E-Y, I seen straight jacket, come clean, big said it was a dream, now it's a living thing, with you and living kings, I mean it, I mean it, y'all seen in the R-E-D, I mean, original nation, with Ponsala, I mean it, straight jacket, come clean, y'all seen in the R-E-D.
This is how we ride and roll. Soldier for life for sure.
Hey, this is JC, aka Afro Black, and I am here with you for another delicious Black Sunday to drop nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. And so I'm here today. Missed last week, wasn't here last week, but I'm here this week. I had to postpone last week. I had all types of issues going on. Not just technical issues with my computer and internet access, but just in general. You know, we had cold wind, blizzards, rains. We still got rainy going on over here, but you know what? It was really rainy that day. Wind was blowing and things. So, but I'm here today to drop nothing but conscious truth to the indigenous conscious community. So, before I get started, let me change my music, please, so we can have something more laid back to what you heard a little while ago. That cut, that intro, that was a group called, a conscious indigenous group called A Tribe Called Red. And the rapper you heard rapping, anybody who've heard the brother, Mr. Brother, Most Def, or might I say Yasin, he calls himself Yasin Bey, aka Most Def. And so him, and you know, he said he wasn't gonna rap no more, but he did something with those brothers because those brothers are conscious, those brothers are political, those brothers are dropping truth. A group called A Tribe Called Red. And so that's who you heard just a little while ago in the intro of the show. And so let me play something by a Tribe Called Red called Burning Your Village, which will be my backdrop to today's podcast subject matter. Let me bring it like that there. And so, as we continue today with today's podcast subject, today's podcast topic is Pan-Africanism and the conscious movement, a racial reclassification or cultural regeneration. Again, podcast topic today is Pan-Africanism and the conscious movement, a racial reclassification or cultural regeneration, ? And so I'm not here to verberate on this alone. My queen is with me, the one I enjoy vibrating with, living with, loving with each and every day, to share her perspective from the divine female perspective. Queen, are you here?
Hello, my beautiful people.
So, Queen.
Yeah.
I'm glad you joined me today. You know, you be a hard-working woman. You even have to work on the days that you join me. That's why I say...
Usually.
Yeah, my queen is a hard-working woman for her family. You know, I love that. You know, hard to say that. You know, I mean, actually, a lot of women work hard today, but I'm just talking about mine. But on that note, today's podcast subject, Queen, you've heard the podcast topic. You know what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about something controversial, at least controversial from the perspective of those who might not like what I'm going to bring across the table today. Pan-Africanism and the conscious movement. Are the two the same? Is the conscious movement and Pan-Africanism, is it one and the same? Are there two separate ideologies, two subject principles and standards, two subject concepts, two separate... You tell me, Queen. Go. I mean, from your perspective, what's your take on this?
Yes and no. It depends on what part of the conscious movement you're talking about.
Go ahead, bring it, because I got a whole lot of information. We just getting this thing started because I got an audio cast I want to play by the brother they call the Prince of Pan-Africanism. It's just by that name right there. There's a lot out there who, if any of my African conscious brothers and sisters are listening to the podcast, they know who I'm talking about. Those who used to be African conscious know who I'm talking about. My indigenous brothers and sisters should know who I'm talking about. Dr. Umar Johnson, the one and only, who's the voice of today's generation of Pan-African or so-called Black liberation thought and ideology and so forth and so forth. So I got something I want to play on him. I'll play by him in an interview where he gives his the tenets or the principles of Pan-Africanism. My take on this, to maybe give you a little bit more information so you can comment on this. My take on this is what is the purpose of Pan-Africanism? And from the perspective of Pan-African ideology and the principles and the tenets of Pan-Africanism, does it hurt the cause of the indigenous awakening? Because as my position on this and yours as well, is that we know. Wait a minute. I hear somebody in the backdrop. Okay, my brother Currington. Okay, hey, before I let you raise a question, brother Currington, let me continue on with my queen right quick. As I was stating, is it because a lot of black people are waking up to their indigenous cultural identity. Mm-hmm. They're waking up to the fact of who they are, that they're not African. We are not African. Most black people in America who call themselves African American are not African, and they're not African American. They are Americans. Yeah. They are indigenous black Americans. Their roots are here in America. Their roots are not in Africa. Their roots are not in the culture or in the heritage of Africa, but in the culture and in the heritage of the indigenous people of America, the Amerindians, the Paleo-Black Amerindians of America. So the question is, does black Pan-Africanism, does Pan-Africanism in itself, does it hurt the cause of awakening black people from their cultural roots in America? Because most black people who say, okay, I got some Indian in me, but I got some African in me too. And they don't even know that. They don't know that they got African in them at all. They just assuming this. Or they'll say, well, I know I got Indian in me, but, they want to believe they got African in them because of this picture that's been painted to the younger generation, this picture that's been painted even to the older generation. And what picture is that? The picture of the transatlantic slave trade, and that's where slavery started. And that's a total emphatic lie. So, Queen, go ahead, you take over. Give us your divine principles. And I got the audio cast I want to play, and I also got some information I want to share about the history of Pan-Africanism. So, go ahead, Queen.
Well, personally, what I've learned about Pan-Africanism, it would hurt the indigenous peoples because it's trying to say that no matter where you're from, you're all African. All black folks are African, which is a false statement in itself. So I don't see how it helps the indigenous peoples movement.
I'd rather agree with you, Queen. Now, Brother Currington, if you want to raise a question or if you want to comment on what we just said, or if you want to do both, go ahead.
Well, basically, I would like to have an understanding of what Pan-Africanism is. I have somewhat of little knowledge of it, but not much. So
okay.
That's what I would really like to know, to give a fair assessment, whether it's a culture, with a cultural movement or an identity movement.
Okay, so you know what? I'm glad you raised that question. So we can go into that. But before we go into that, let me set the floor mat. Let me set the framework so we have some, at least from my perspective, some information I wrote down that I want to kind of pattern the podcast by, because I want to first also say that I don't want anybody thinking that I have a huge issue against Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism for the African, that's fine. Okay, I have nothing. Yeah, I mean, because there's brothers like Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Yohanan, Dr. Yosef Ben Yohanan, might I say, brothers like that who set the floor mat for me when I was coming up on my journey. So I got a lot of love and respect for those brothers' works, but within the parameters, within the boundaries of an African or a person who is of African descent, and they're here in America and they've lost their identity. That's fine for them, But when you start to research truth and research historical truth, and you research your cultural identity, then you have to grow above some of the things that you thought you knew, or even the things that you held to. But it doesn't take away my respect for the brothers who set the floor mat, who set the path, the brothers who set the framework for African culture, African history, preserving African history for something for those who are of African descent. So my problem, so again, my problem is with a lot of brothers and sisters. I want them out there thinking that I'm against my African conscious brothers and sisters. I'm only against those who are against truth. Anybody, it doesn't matter, black, brown, white, or you, whatever. If you're against truth, then I got an issue with you on that level. So I got something that to get us started, the audio cast I want to play of Dr. Umar, but I also want to say these words or some information I think that people need to consider in the process of us talking about this subject matter, that we need to learn to see the bigger picture, realizing that the very importance of the factors, that 3 factors of European colonization that has influenced black people here in America, which is I think a lot of black people don't really focus in on. There was 3 main objectives of European colonization, and those 3 main factors was purpose, power, and politics. Well, and what exactly was the purpose of early European colonization? Their original purpose and agenda was to take resources, to control resources, and to make money, and to control that resource was not just people and slaves, but the resource was the land, the minerals, the gold, the diamonds, and the dirt, the land itself. So that was one of the purposes of colonial colonization. Today, Europeans holds most of the world's military and power, increased political power and influence in the world over, and it is the military power that gave way to native compromise, where our ancestors got tired of warring, got tired of dying, and a lot of them compromised with treaties. And these treaties, and that's all has to do with politics. Like I say, purpose, power, and politics. And so military is the power. The military is the power. The U.S., the white man has a long history going all the way back to the Greek periods of using military might to and with the end results is political power and political control. And so purpose, power, and politics all work hand in hand. And so these are the 3 things we got to consider. Even when we think about our own cultural identity, we have to consider, because they've painted a picture to black people and to the populace at large. They painted a picture that they want us to accept when it comes to when it comes to politics, purpose, and power. That they were just fighting as Indians because they came over here and the Indians was killing them and raping their children, their women, and so they had to protect themselves, and in the process the government was taking land. They paint the picture that they want us to see. So we have to research these 3 purposes for ourselves. So in that, let me before I'll play this audio cast with Brother Umar Johnson. Let me play my favorite brother. So, because as long as I'm talking about these type of subject matters, I'm going to have to bring this brother in, because to me, I think black people need to think about what this brother's saying. I played it before. I'm going to play it again, so I'm going to play it right now, so we can understand what's going on, and then I will play Brother Umar, and we'll take it from there.
You go to a reservation, you see poverty, you see churches, and you see liquor stores. When you go to any hood, you see poverty, you see churches, and you see liquor stores. So what make you think you're not on a reservation? Right? So all these achievements that we ascribe to African Americans, these are achievements by Native Americans who had to take on the identity of being African American because they was hanging us. But you think they was hanging people because they was Africans. Africans just want to go home. Nigga from here want to take his shit over. But you think they was hanging people because they was Africans. Africans just want to go home. Nigga from here want to take his shit over.
There you go. That's Brother Nasir. I had to play that right quick. Now I'm going to play Brother Umar. And I want to play that right quick with Brother Nasir just to point out the fact of what he said. Exactly. Africans want to go back to Africa. Black folks who are indigenous to America, black folks who are native to America, black folks who have the bloodline of the indigenous ancestors running through their veins and through their and you know the spiritual DNA of our ancestors. They know they're at home, and they fighting for home. That's the ones who's been fighting in the wars. You feel me? That's the ones that's been that the first Black Congress that dates to the early 1800s. The first, they were indigenous. But do you really believe that the white man's gonna let an African from Africa come over here and create a Congress to be the first Black Congress in the early 1800s, which I believe was around between 1830 1840, the first Black Congress, which consisted of about 10 brothers? Them were not African brothers. Them were indigenous black brothers of America. Them brothers' roots go all the way to the first people of America, of Turtle Island, those original black copper color native indigenous Indians of America. That's who those brothers represent. That's who black people represent today. but we've been reclassified people. And so I want to play Brother Dr. Umar, who's going to talk about the tenets of Pan-Africanism, which a lot of black people don't want to let go. I mean, which is comprehensible when you have been embraced something that you believe is your culture, is your identity, and so now you're waiting to go back, or waiting one day to go back, or at least to visit Africa, because you've been taught this, groomed. This ideology has been groomed into you from a child, from the time you was born, through school. Through the little bit of history, black history, put in the history books, that first thing they want to tell black people is that they're slaves. Through the media and through movies and through television programs like Roots, and even modern programs like 12 Years a Slave, it's been groomed in us that our ancestors are African. That's a lie, though. So let me play Brother Umar, who's going to give his take on it, and he's a brother that travels throughout the United States and even outside the United States. He's a part of the Pan-African Circle, and so he's pushing that same agenda. So the question is, what is the purpose of this agenda? I'm gonna tell you what it is: to make all black people African, and that's a lie. That's wrong. So let's take it from here.
I have with me for the Manhood Hour, and he will be taking your call, Dr. Umar Johnson. Dr. Johnson is a psychologist and Pan-Africanist. He wrote the book Psychoacademic Holocaust, the Special Education and ADHD War Against Black Boys. Very interesting, and I wanted to talk to him about these and other issues. Dr. Johnson, welcome to the show, sir.
Good morning. The honor's mine. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here, buddy. The first thing I'd like to ask you, just take about 10 seconds or so. What is a Pan-Africanist?
Pan-Africanist is someone who believes that all African people, irrespective of culture, language, religion, class, or nationality, are members of one human family, and that they should primarily identify themselves as members of that human family before they identify themselves as members of any other group, religious, secular, or otherwise. So we believe that being African is more important and should take precedence over being Christian, Muslim, a Greek, a Mason, or anything else. And the second tenet of Pan-Africanism is that we have an international responsibility to work together in order to collectively improve the conditions under which African people live. Pan-Africanism posits that we can't really rise as separate groups. We have to rise as one because our conditions are so intimately linked in with one another that you can't possibly realize success on the regional or national level without working with the whole international African family.
Amazing. And so does that include white people, too, who are born and raised in Africa?
Okay. No. Pan-Africanism believes in self-reliance. And so when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we're talking about a self-reliant movement of African people solving their own problems, which is no different than what other groups within the human family do. European Jews primarily work with European Jews. Arabs work with Arabs. East Indians primarily work amongst themselves. So if we look at the way in which most cultures operate, they operate with a degree of exclusivity. And as African people, we reserve the right to also be exclusive.
Okay, you heard it right there. That's a clip. I just took a clip. I got other clips from the same interview. So let's verberate on so far what he talked about. Now, as we talk about this, eventually, I might end up doing it the part 2 of this podcast subject matter. Then I'm going to get into the history of Pan-Africanism. So based on what Brother Umar is talking about, I'm going to go further into it to validify the fact of what is the purpose? What is the agenda of Pan-Africanism? So we heard what Brother Umar said. I heard some contradictions in what he was saying. What do you say, Queen?
Well, he's taking the term Africa, the continental name that was given to the continent, and symbolizing it with just a color. And he did say that Pan-Africanism was no matter the the tribe you're from, the area you're from, what part of Africa you're from. That it's all Africans for Africa, period.
Now, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that though, because I heard what he spoke was kind of to me.
But then he said that white folks who are born and raised in Africa are Africans.
Well, no, not only that. Look, he said no matter where you at.
No matter where you're at.
So no matter what race you are, no matter what ethnic group you're part of, if you're part of what they consider African descent, then they want you to identify as African.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what makes an African? I mean, because it sounds like to me, they're saying that no matter what country you live in, no matter what country you're born in, no matter where you raised, no matter who your mommy is or whatever,
regardless of culture and nationality, and all Africans the same for Africa.
Well,
but who does he classify as African then?
That's the question. How is he classifying people
because he
of
said
African?
the white Africans in Africa aren't Africans.
Well, that's the question. What is he basing? What guidelines or protocols people like him are in his circle or using that classify people as African? Now, based on this research that I've done, I've already come to a conclusion, and so I'm gonna present this research to you guys as we go on this subject matter. But I already know where he's leading us to, because they're talking about the diaspora. They call it the African diaspora, which was the transatlantic slave trade that they say went around the world. But see, they forget about the first slave trade, which was not African. Well, at least it's at least starting in 1492. Now, African slavery actually go back further than indigenous Native American slavery. If you're going back into the first contact of Europeans, or even if they weren't considered Europeans, we could just say Greeks and Africans, who, went off and war and enslaved each other and so forth. And then we can go into the early, if we go into the history, Africa was enslaved in Europe years ago before they even started transporting Africans anywhere else. But if you talk about slavery that has anything to do with North America, which dates to 1492 and 1530 of the Spanish conquest of North America, that's a whole nother ball game. And these guys got a lot of confusion, and they're very dogmatic. If you talk to some of them, they're very dogmatic. Some of them won't even talk to you at all if they know you're not going to agree with them, which makes more sense to me. If you know somebody's not going to agree with you, why even go there? But the question is, the subject matter is Pan-Africanism and black consciousness. Okay, are the two the same? Because the black conscious movement, which if you talk about the black conscious movement that was started by Steve Biko in the early 70s, that was about him keeping his people to be mindful of who they are. They were Africans who were the original people of South Africa. And for them to hold on to their cultural identity, not just knowing who they are, but to hold on to their culture, because Stephen Biko saw his people losing themselves by the influence of the dominant class, which was white South Africans who had dominated Africa. And so they were losing themselves by taking on this European identity. And Stephen Biko, Brother Biko, didn't like that. Yeah. See, so the consciousness that he created in South Africa was to retain your cultural identity as an African. That makes sense. But he spoke to his people and their oppression in South Africa. When they moved over here, when consciousness moved over here to the United States in the late 70s, it took on that African flavor and that African identity along with it. As I said, it's like embedding this brainwashing on the black populace that they are African. Originally, what we should have did was used the same concept that Stephen Biko gave his people, and should have used it over here for us to retain our identity through our indigenous people, our indigenous ancestors of America. But you know what? That part of the history has been taken out of the picture for the most part. That's not a whole lot of teachers, you don't hear white folks talking about indigenous black Native Americans or indigenous black people who were the first people of America, which were a black people, and that black people that Americans are their children and their descendants. You don't hear the television, the History Channel, the Discovery Channel talking about these things. Is that true, Queen?
No, they don't. You don't get to see much of anything of the original indigenous people they came across when they first colonized the states.
So, on that note, let's continue on with another track about Brother Umar, who's considered the prince of Pan-Africanism, Black liberation here in America. Let's continue our discussion with this brother. Well, not our discussion. Listen into his interview with him explaining Pan-Africanism. So let's continue, and we will continue after this.
So are you saying that color first, then religion, nationality, and then the rest?
Not color, because color is a superficial characteristic. Color is nothing more than a symbol of culture and history and biological connectivity. So we would say African family first. Not all Africans have an obvious African look. Most of us do. You can generally tell who is and is not a direct descendant of the original inhabitants of Nile Valley culture. But not all of us look obviously or phenotypically African. We have Africans who can look European and look like other races because we are the mothers and fathers of all other people. It's not uncommon to see some of us look like other people. But yes, most of us are phenotypically African, but not all of us. So it is the DNA that makes us African.
So it's African first and then the rest. But let me ask, in America, this doesn't include Black Americans who were born in this country. We're not a part of that stuff, right? Because we are Americans. But how?
No, sir.
But how is that?
No,
I mean, for example, I was born in America, down in Alabama, and I'm 100% American. So I wouldn't be a part of this African stuff, right?
No, that's totally incorrect. Pan-Africanism as a philosophy was actually born in the Western Hemisphere. Pan-Africanism came from the Americas. It came from the Caribbean and went to Africa. So believe it or not, ironically, it was created by quote-unquote American Africans. And so when we talk about Pan-Africanism, as I said earlier in the definition, it includes all African people, wherever we may live. That's the entire purpose of the philosophy, is to make African people understand that regardless of where you may be, you're still African. There's European Jews all over the planet, but there's still European Jews.
But I'm not African, though. I don't feel like an African. I don't think like an African. I don't look like an African.
Well, that's because of
I am 100%. I am 100% American.
There you go. That's my second clip. I want us to verberate on. You heard, like I said, Pan-Africanism's agenda is to make all black people African. You heard that, brother. Tell Brother Umar, I'm 100% American. Now, black people are so confused today. Black people are so deluded by this African concept, brainwashing, matrix type crap that we've been.
JP.
Go ahead, my brother. Since you got something to say, go ahead.
But I wanted to get this out before you went any further. One thing with that interview, and him and the interviewer was saying he's an American. I think what we need to know is what he meant by that.
Okay, and that's what I was.
Did he mean he was American? Based upon. Go ahead.
That's what I was gonna. When you stopped me in my while I was explaining, I was gonna say exactly that. Most black people have a twisted concept of what an American is, because when you just look at the term, just look at the word itself, American, it means a person from America. Now, if you do historical research, and I'm not sure what Jesse Peterson, Brother Peterson, because he has a podcast called the Jesse Peterson Show, and a lot of black people don't like him. They call him all types of things, and if you do your research, most black folks know, those who've done their historical research know that the original Americans were indigenous black people, the original Americans. But you know what? Because that history is not a part of the general historical book in America. I say in America because I want you to know in other countries like Spain, France, even England, and
a lot of parts of Africa, too.
And even in Africa, they already know this. They already know this, that the original people of America were a copper-colored, brown-colored, dark-colored, dark brown-colored, even black-looking people who were indigenous to this people. Now, mind you, don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that they were only dark brown people in America because just like Africa, where Africans range from dark brown to black-looking black brown to a brown brown, you had those same rainbow colors, or I ain't gonna say rainbow. You had those same different complexions here in America, from dark brown to brown, copper color brown, light brown, and very light skin. This is where you got the very light skinned Native American. But black people have not been taught that concept. They've only been given the Hollywood version of what a Native American is supposed to look like. And so this is in the back of most Americans' minds when you hear the name Indian. But you know what? The original people of Turtle Island, the original indigenous people of America weren't Indians. They weren't Indians. That's a European concept. That's a European label. They never called themselves Indians. They called themselves by their tribal clan names. If you was an Apache, if you was a Comanche, if you was a Yamasee, if you was a Yuchi, whatever your tribal name, that's who you were. So the term Indian, that's a European label, European concept. That Native Americans are light-skinned brothers and sisters, are light-skinned, the ones who a lot of them who sold us out, who still selling us out today, don't want to recognize that black people of America are their brothers and sisters. It's those light-skinned ones who sold us out, and a lot of them who are still selling us out today are the ones who don't want to acknowledge, even though they know the truth. A lot of them know the truth. They don't want to tell the truth because they don't want to create no more problems for themselves that they're already dealing with right now, which has to do with anything from alcoholism, drugs, unemployment. The same thing that the black community dealing with. Our light-skinned Native American brothers on reservations are dealing with the same political issues, and so admitting that the black community are their fellow brothers and sisters, that's an extra political weight most of them don't even want to deal with. They've been taught against by their grandparents and parents and so forth. So the question still stands. You said, what is that brother talking about? He's talking about those who know and those who don't know. Those who are those? Black people who have ancestry in this country going all the way past 1626 African slavery. Black people who've been here before Africans were brought here. Slavery that went on for over 200 years in this country before the first Africans were brought here as slaves. That's who Jesse Peterson is talking about when he says, I am a full-fledged American. He knows what he's talking about. Whoopi Goldberg knows what she's talking about. It's most black folks who are ignorant, and you know what? When a subject like this comes up, and you get a lot of backlash on black folks who will say, I'm not an African American, I am a full-fledged American, I'm a black American, and they get backlash. It just shows you how ignorant the mass black populace is when it comes to history. So, Queen, you got something you want to weigh in on this?
No, I seem to be covering it pretty well. I mean, because the original term for an American was the native indigenous people here. And we've covered before in other shows how the original explorers discovered that some of the natives here were just as dark as Ethiopians and just as light as some light-skinned mixed people today.
And I'm going to be dealing with that issue again. I'm going to be dealing with the original people of indigenous people of America in another podcast topic that I'm going to be called. That's going to be called genocide. I'm going to be dealing with that again. But sticking to this subject matter that we're talking about right now, though, Pan-Africanism Pan-Africanism and the conscious movement. Mm-hmm. A racial classification or cultural regeneration. Does Pan-Africanism reclassify us from our indigenous identity, who we are originally as Black Americans, as indigenous Black Americans? Does it reclassify us to embrace Pan-Africanism? I say yes. What do you say, Queen?
It appears to do so. I mean, it's a reclass. Pan-Africanism is stating that, well, according to the man here who started Pan-Africanism and boasting for it, is clearly saying that all Black folks, no matter where in the world they are from, no matter how far back their history is, they're all Africans.
And that's crazy.
If he wants to go back that far back, then he might as well say everybody in the world is an African. But he's only trying to group together people by color, even though he says he's not. Exactly.
That's the contradicting in what he's contradictory in what he's saying. You know what? Talking about, African identity, most people believe, I got this idea that Africans accept Black people in America. They want us to come back there. That's not totally true. Now, even though you got a lot of Black Africans out there that do accept us, you have a whole lot of them that don't accept us. The question is, how do they view Black people at all in Africa? As you got a lot of these Black conscious people or African conscious minded people who want to go visit Africa, at least visit if not stay, which doesn't make sense, because if you believe that Africa is your home, you should go to Africa. That's your home. Go live there. Take the nearest, get your passport together and go there. Don't just visit and then prepare to move, because that's where you belong. But personally, on a personal level, that's not how I feel. I want Black folks to wake up and realize who they are, that you are native to America, that you are a child of the original indigenous people of Turtle Island. That's what I want Black folks to wake up to. You feel me? So I got a blog that I took from the internet, from a site called Africans and African Americans, Complex Relations. And so I wanted to know how, this doesn't speak for all of Africa, but it does give you a little teeny insight on how they view Black people in America. You see it, Queen, right here?
And where are we looking at?
The article the main original article, Pan-Africanism and the Conscious Movement. If you scroll down, it's right highlighted yellow, Africans and African Americans, Complex Relations.
Okay.
So this right here, these are different blogs from people in Africa about how they feel and how they believe Africans feel about Black folks. So we want to read that for me, please? This one here, Africans' negative view of Black Americans. Slurs, nicknames, and derogatory names by Africans towards Black Americans. Go ahead and check.
Okay, nicknames, skinfolk and kinfolk, a term used in Africa by Africans towards Black Americans and its meaning and definition. Skinfolk, being considered family by a melanated skin complexion alone, but are not culturally or ethnically related. The term kinfolk by African definition is any member or extended member of a family, tribe, or clan in which people are culturally connected. The derogatory slur, akata, which means wild animal, a term Africans use to look down on Black Americans and set themselves apart from Black Americans.
Did you hear that? Now let's go. I went to a blog site, and let's see if some of what I'm talking about is just true. Now, these are definitions that I researched and found out. These are terms that are used in Africa to make fun of Black people. But you just heard my queen just read kinfolk, skinfolk, and one called akata. So go ahead and read down below the one by Cleveland Chloe, who lives in a town in Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can Lassery repeat that last definition for me, please?
Go ahead and repeat that, Queen.
Alrighty. For akata, which means wild animal, is a term Africans use to look down on Black Americans to set themselves apart.
Okay, go ahead and read that first passage there about from Cleveland Cloet, who lives in Cape Town, Africa.
Cleveland Cloet states, centered around media portrayals of them, but at the same time, as a Black person who understands how media portrayals of us usually works, I can see and understand how great they are. They live in a heavily oppressive environment, yet still manage to emerge and be at the forefront of their nation in many different ways, particularly in the music industry. They are constantly trendsetters. These trends permeate all over the world, even down here in South Africa. One thing I don't particularly understand about Black Americans, though, due in large part to my ignorance on the matter, is the constant use of the term African American. To my knowledge, the majority of them have roots in America dating back hundreds of years. Surely they're American by now. Conversely, I doubt they're very African anymore either. I've never met a Black American before, and all this is just based on my own presumptions, inferences, and again, ignorance on the matter. But I think it would make the most sense to simply call themselves Black. I don't mean to offend, and my opinion on the matter should not change or have any effect on how anyone chooses to identify themselves. It's a purely internal judgment, and it wouldn't even change how I interact with a Black American, whether they refer to themselves as Black, African American, or anything else for that matter. In the end, you're American. At least I think so. You're also Black, and melanin is great.
Now, you heard that. That was just an excerpt from one person in Africa who blogged on that site. Didn't make sense to them why Black folks in America call themselves African American. An African making that statement. You hear that, Queen?
Yep.
An African in South Africa. She lives in Cape Town, Africa. She said it doesn't matter. Where that part at again?
He or she.
Go ahead, read that part again.
Which part, Darren?
The part that puzzled her. One thing I don't particularly understand about Black Americans, though, due in large part to my ignorance on the matter, is the constant use of the term African American. To my knowledge, the majority of them have roots in America. She says that. How could she know this? How could she know this? Well, we already know, because more people in other countries know more about us than we know about ourselves. White people know more about us than we know about us. These white devils know what they're doing by disseminating as little knowledge of truth or truth of knowledge as possible to Black people. They know what they're doing.
That's true. I mean, I was you showed me this newscast from the BBC, a BBC channel on YouTube. And they were talking about how Black Americans here are finally waking up to the knowledge that they are actually Native Americans. And he literally almost said, duh. He said the rest of the world already knows this, and it's no big secret. It's just we're unaware of it.
Basically, he stopped himself and went so far. But at the same time, he still made the point that the people who don't know who they are is us.
Exactly. Europe knows who we are. Most Africans know who we are. It's the Native Americans here, the Black Americans here, who don't know who they are, because they're either too busy listening to history books and the white teachings than their own family history. Exactly.
Well, not only that, and
if they have a family history to listen to.
Truth be told, we know that white folks don't want Black people knowing who they are, because there was a reason for, like I say, there was a purpose, and it had to do with purpose, power, and politics when it came to America. The white man spent a lot of money, a lot of blood, a lot of death and tears, a lot of sweat, a lot of fear taking this country. Mm-hmm. So there was a reason why he did that, and also a reason why our light-skinned brothers, turned their backs on us, and some are waking up to the truth and saying, we got to come together as one, and some are still holding on to their white supremacist principles that they've been taught as a child, which is basically to hate their own brother, which is the darker complected of who we are,
mm-hmm.
which is their darker end of their family. So on that note, that was just one blog of a sister. Her question about Black people. The question is back to Pan-Africanism, the ideology of Pan-Africanism. Now, I heard Brother Johnson says that Pan-Africanism started he said in America, but he said in the Americas, or he said the West of Americas. I believe that's what the statement he made. I did research on this. I wanted to know what was going on. What's up with this? What's up with Pan-Africanism? And so, and Pan-Africanism goes all the way to the 1800s when it began. It did start. It started with three brothers. One of those three brothers were from America. The other two were from the West Indies. Okay, to give you the names of the brothers who started Pan-Africanism. One brother, his name is, let me pull up this brother's name. His name is Martin Robeson Delaney, who was born May 6, 1812. Okay, and he got together with a brother by the name of Alexander Cromwell, who was born March 3rd, 1819. And then there's another brother who goes by the name of Edward Wilmot Biden, who was born August 3rd, 1832. Okay, so now I want to go into the history of these brothers. But before I go into the history of the guys who actually started Pan-Africanism and how it, and then, this is going to go into a second part of a podcast because it goes into the history of Pan-Africanism. But I want to make the point that during my research on Pan-Africanism, at least the history of Pan-Africanism, and finding out about these three guys who put together the ideology of Pan-Africanism, I'm going to state right now, Pan-Africanism has its roots in changing and reclassifying the people of America and shipping them back to America. That whole 1830, what was that? The speech that Frederick Douglass gave, 1894. The 1894 speech of Frederick Douglass is proof. Frederick Douglass knew Martin Delaney. Him and Martin Robeson Delaney, who's the father of Pan-Africanism, used to work for Frederick Douglass. Worked for Frederick, helped put together the newspaper that Frederick Douglass had called the North Star. Martin Delaney worked for Frederick Douglass. So Frederick Douglass knew when he wrote that speech of 1894, the speech where he talked about, matter of fact, I'm going to read a paragraph from the speech. He says, a bad thing about it is that of late, owing to persecution, begun to advocate by colored men of knowledge and ability and learning, and every little while some white statesman becomes its advocate. He's talking about the advocate of advocating black people going back to black Americans moving and relocating to Africa. Those gentlemen would doubtless have their opinion of me. I certainly have my opinion of them. My opinion is that if they are sensible, they are insincere, and if they are insincere, they are not sensible. They know, or they ought to know, that it would take more money than it costs of the late war to transport even one half of the colored people of the United States to Africa. Whether intentionally or not, they are, at least I think, simply trifling with an afflicted people. They urge them to look for relief where they ought not to, where they know that relief is impossible. The only excuse they can make for the measure is that there is no hope for the Negro here, and that the colored people of America owe something to Africa. So Frederick Douglass knew. He knew Martin Delaney, which is one of the forefathers of Pan-Africanism. And Martin Delaney used to work with Frederick Douglass in the abolitionist movement. So the question is, like I say, this scheme, the scheme of Back to Africa scheme that Frederick Douglass talks about in his speech of 1894, Martin Delaney, along with those two other guys that I mentioned, which is Alexander Cromwell and Edward Wilmot Biden, have their clause, have their agenda, had their plan while putting together, in my opinion, and I'm going to substantiate this opinion as I share more historical information on the subject matter of Pan-Africanism and the conscious movement, a racial reclassification or cultural regeneration. So on that note, I'm getting close to my time to close, but I'd like to read some more information. Let me read some information right quick. I'd like to read some information I'm talking about the main subject matter of who I said the father of Pan-Africanism, which is Martin Delaney. Let me read a little bit about his history right here. Okay. Also, in the process of, if you learn about these guys and research, I would encourage the conscious movement, indigenous brothers and sisters, go learn about these brothers. You'll find out how all these brothers are connected. Martin Delany was an African-American abolitionist, the first African-American field officer in the U.S. Army, and one of the earliest African-Americans to encourage to return to Africa. Delany was born in Charlestown, Virginia, and West Virginia, which is now West Virginia, to a slave father and a free mother. That caught my eye. When I read that, a free mother, a slave father and a free mother. Boy, that sounds weird. How can you have a free Negro? I mean, excuse me, his father was a slave Negro, but his mother was free. So that's the whole. I got my, on that thought. For his mother to be free, she had to be a Native American. She had to be an indigenous Native American sister to be free back in the early 1800s. Delany's mother took her children to Pennsylvania in 1822 to avoid the enslavement and persecution brought on by attempting to teach her children to read and write, which was illegal in the state that at that time. In 1833, Martin Delany began to apprenticeship with a Pittsburgh physician and soon opened a successful medical practice and occupying leeching and so forth. And in 1843, he began publishing a newspaper in Pittsburgh called the Mystery. And later he joined Frederick Douglass to produce and promote the North Star in Rochester. So that's a little history right there on Martin Robeson Delany, who's the father of Pan-Africanism. Now, I got some more information that will prove and show that his connection to Africa and the meetings that they had in Africa in putting together Pan-Africanism for the purpose of black people in America to be reclassified as Africans rather than colored or Negroes or black Americans. And so there is a scheme behind this, and but that I ain't got much time. It's 3:57 right now. I'm running out of time. You got anything you want to add to what I was talking about? Anything you want to say about Pan-Africanism and reclassification?
No, not really. You kind of pretty much covered everything there. But it is interesting to learn some of the things I haven't heard before, and there's some other stuff you would like to look into, like the people who started it and their background.
Well, I really didn't want to get into this pamphlet because this pamphlet that out by him, I had not finished reading, and I got it chopped up into parts. So he was definitely a man of action. But eventually, when you read this information, and this is the part I didn't get a chance to get down to, he talks about within the parameters of his writings. He talks about black people being assimilated into the system and becoming a part of the system. Instead of the system respecting the indigenous black man, he rather wanted black people to assimilate into the American way of life. And so I'm going to have to get more into that another time and focus in on those parts, because those parts that I wanted to bring out, I didn't actually cover by reading the beginning of the pamphlet. But Delany is one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism. And also Alexander Cromwell, who was a minister, a dedicated minister in the Catholic Church, and also this other brother by the name of Edward Wilmot Blyden. I believe he was also...
That says Blyden, by the way.
Blyden? That's his name, Blyden?
Yeah, that's
I
Blyden.
believe he was a minister as well. Let me see. The father of Pan-Africanism was an educator, a writer, a diplomat, a politician, and primarily in Liberia, born in West Indies. He joined the free black immigration to the region from the United States. He also taught 4 or 5 years in the British West African colonies of Sierra Leone in the early 20th century. His writings on Pan-Africanism were influential in both colonies, which were started during the slavery years of the resettlement of free blacks from the United States and Great Britain. See, that right there, just talking about. Now, this was Now, all these guys, Edward Wilmot, Alexander Cromwell, and Martin Delany, they all knew each other. They were working together. And so I will piece the rest of the puzzles of this together, this subject matter, next week in a part 2. So I'll do a better do better at that, because I know I get to reading and reading. I get to reading and stating information that's not really beneficial to the topic at hand. But them brothers work together. The question is, why did they do this? What was the purpose of them putting together Pan-Africanism? When you listen to Dr. Umar, he tells you it's basically for everybody to be on the same note and put being the African identity, the African reclassification first, no matter what your racial background is, no matter what your religion is, no matter what country you come from or what group you're from. And even and at one in his statement, he even said no matter what color you are, which he contradicts on that statement right there, because he turns around and says, well, no, a white person can't join the Pan-African movement, but you got to be, I guess, white-black. I guess. I don't know. You tell me.
You got me on that one.
Well, because he said color doesn't matter, but at the same time, color does matter. That doesn't make sense. So, I mean, I would have to ask him on a person, what did you mean by that? Color don't matter, and then turn around and say, well, white people can't join the movement. Well, you know, and you got white people who've been raised in black families. Today, you got white people that have been raised all their life in South Africa. All their friends are black. And in some cases, they come from interracial relationships. Their mom is white, dad's black, or dad's white, mom is black, and dad is white, or however that goes. You know, a lot of them come from, and basically, you know, you have a black woman with children, a white man with children. They come there, become one household, become one family. So the white side of the family ended up being raised with black people. The black side of the family ended up being raised with white people. So what do you do in a case like that, where you got a white person who wants to be a part of the movement, and that white person has been raised around black people all their lives, that's all they know, and they can vibrate and they can feel and vibe with the movement, and they want to do something about it. He said it wasn't about color, but then he turned around and said it's about color. Am I wrong? Did he?
He said it's all about DNA. But the thing is that, as we covered in our DNA segment, that those DNA companies are lying about what those people are from. I mean, they gave an example of how corrupt those companies are. A white man sent his DNA off to 3 to 4 different companies, and some of them said he was black. Some said he was from Africa. Some said he was from Europe, and some said he had genes from he knows wasn't even in his ancestry.
Yeah. So the DNA thing, you know, that right there is a waste of time to even go into, in my opinion, unless you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know anything about the DNA conflict and scam that's going on. But when it comes back to the Pan-African thing, the thing about it, as I was stating, consciousness, the conscious movement is a separate standard, a separate concept, a separate way of doing things, because it's about embracing your culture, your cultural identity. So from the conscious movement, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong whatsoever. It's a good thing for black people to embrace their native family, their native identity, their native culture. That's a good thing. And that is black. That is American. That is us. And so that's something we should do. Now, from the Pan-African perspective, it conflicts with that. And so my point of doing this show is to point out that Pan-Africanism is for the African. It's not for black folks in America. It's for the African. Even now, the question is, you know, you have black people from America to put it together, but their whole agenda and mission was to ship black people. You heard me read about, what was that, Edward Wilmot, what's his name, Everett Blight? And it talked about, that was his agenda.
Blyden.
Yeah. You know, I read a part of that, would just mention that brother, his whole thing was to, you know, it started back where he wanted to send black folks to Africa. He was sending, matter of fact, he was doing it. He was sending black people in America and in Great Britain. Now, if he was sending Africans back to Africa, that's a wonderful thing if that's what he was doing. But if he was sending black folks that were not African to Africa and convincing them that they're African, even though they knew they weren't, he's wrong. So he was doing this, you know, back in, he did this throughout his life. You know, he even lived in Liberia. And he says his writings attracted attention in the sponsoring countries as well. He felt that Zionism was a model for what he called Ethiopianism. Do you see that?
No.
And that African Americans could return to Africa and redeem it. He believed political independence to be a prerequisite for economic independence, and argued that Africans must counter the neo-colonial policies of former colonial theory forces. So, I mean, he was a staunch. He was a serious Pan-African as Edward Wilmot Biden. So, but on that note, we got to go. Can't do this all day long. Got to come an end to the show. So, Brother Carrington, you got any last words? Nephew, you heard it. I got more to do. I'm going to have to present it next week. I'm going to have to also present it in a more powerful way next week. Put the meat of my information out there. Because the way I started the show today, to me, was kind of, laggy. But I did what I wanted to do. My point was to point out to get people thinking about the fact that is Pan-Africanism beneficial for the black community? It's been around since, as you know it, since its conception in the early 1900s. Late 1800s, early 1900s. Pan-Africanism has been around since then, and it's obviously, when you do your research on it, it's had its highest heights at the end of slavery to the 1950s and the 1960s, and again, it's had a resurgence again. So the question is it beneficial to black people in America? Or should it just be embraced only with Africans? I say it should be embraced by Africans. What do you say, Queen?
Basically the same thing. I mean, seriously, African. If you know your ancestry is from Africa or you are from it, then accept that. And if you can't trace any African in your ancestry, and all you can come up with is Native American this, Native American, then you need to realize that you are a Native American. You are a Black American. Period.
Anybody else got any questions? Anything you want to say before we get off the air? My nephew Lamar, Brother Currington, I see y'all sitting in the conference room. Anything you might want to say before we disappear and wait until next week to continue this subject matter in a part 2? Well, I enjoyed myself as I will continue this subject matter. You can always join us here at the Black Village Community Podcast. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time. You can always join us at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 857-232-0155. And you can meet us here at the Black Village from 3 to 4 Pacific Standard Time here in the West Coast. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time to share your thoughts on a subject matter that we are discussing. So, but I will be back. I will be black every delicious Black Sunday here at the Black Village Community Podcast. And I am JC, aka Afro Black, your storm of consciousness here at the Black Village Community Podcast. So on that note, I gotta go. Hope everybody grow. May the Great Mother bring us together in the words, under the wings of her truth and love. And so I'm going to leave you guys with that intro cut I was playing earlier by A Tribe Called Red, with Brother Mos Def dropping it, Yasin Bey, as he calls himself. So I'm going to end the show on that, and I will be back next week with a part 2 to Pan-Africanism and the conscious movement, a racial reclassification or cultural regeneration. You tell me. So we will be back. We will be black. Peace and love. I got to go. Much love. I'm out.
We are the Halusa Nation. Our DNA is of earth and sky.
Bismillah. Hey, showing living by the G code. What the is fleek though? Don't ask them, what do he know? What I forgot is better than whatever they remember. Never mind, I'm off it, it's quiet form. Time to put the temper tantrums to the quiet corner. Hush. That's enough, said the ruler. No suckers allowed to break bread or asunder. The daylight, lightning, and the thunder. Sun, moon, and stars, and the hunger. Abundance in bundles. Blessings and troubles. Towers and tunnels, views and valleys, waves and peaks. Streets you from, son. Planet Earth. And ain't scared of no Mars attack. What type of bars is that? Stay off my chat. I'm out they corny riot garments. Top 5 dial on and on them. Superfly, slicker, top rope. Equal diving on them. You why you lying, homie? You won't play with my emotions, Smokey. Big chief, heart rate, big beat, B-E-Y, I seen straight jacket, come clean, big said it was a dream. Now it's a living thing, with you and living kings, I mean it, I mean it. Yasin and Yasin in the R-E-D. I mean it, I mean. Original nation, with one solid, I mean. I mean it, I mean. Straight jacket, come clean, Yasin and Yasin in the R-E-D. Original nation, with one solid, we're with you and living, you know, with you and living.
Confronted by the ally nation, alien nation, the subjects and the citizens see the material religions through trauma and numb. Nothing is related. All the things of the earth and in the sky have energy to be exploited. Even themselves, mining their spirits into souls sold. Into nothing is sacred, not even their self. The ally nation, alien nation,